This afternoon, Books and Books is very happy to present the newest Alai Books title, 8 Miami Poets. And here to introduce our poets, please welcome to the podium the founder of Alai Books and the O Miami Poetry Festival. He is a good friend of Books and Books and the Miami Poetry Supremo, Mr. P. Scott Cunningham.
Thanks, and thank you all for being here. If anyone's watching online out there on the interwebs, thanks for being with us. We're really excited to be here at Books and Books, obviously the sort of heart and center of any sort of literary scene here in Miami. And as Victor said, we're Alai Books. We're a Miami-based press. The press was created with the sole goal of making books here in Miami. The books don't have to be about Miami. Sometimes they will be. But the more important thing is that we're here and we're making books and we're making literary books. That's the goal. We have a Miami audience in mind most of the time when we're printing books, but not always. And anyone who would like to propose a book to us, if you've written one or if you're planning on writing one, we have an online submission system at highlightbooks.com that's spelled very strangely like the sport and with a dash. Because if you just go to Highlight Books without the dash, you go to a betting website. Just also help yourself. Not as literary, but also fun. So we made this book. This book really came out of, this wasn't really planned. This was sort of more of an idea that germinated from, we've been doing O Miami Poetry Festival now since 2011. This will be our 5th year come April. And even before that, we had been doing a visiting writer series that was mostly emerging poets and things like that. And over time, we really started to notice how many more young poets were here in Miami, how many more had moved here, but also people who had grown up here and not left, which 10 years ago happened a lot less often. But as you know, Miami's changed a lot. It's become a much more dynamic place culturally, and it just seems to be getting better and better and better all the time. So I just started noticing so much activity in the poetry scene here that I felt like needed to be crystallized in book form. There's a lot of times until you put something between two covers, you don't necessarily recognize that it's happening. And I felt like it was important to crystallize this moment. And it's important to note that there are way more than 8 Miami poets. There are way more than 8 young Miami poets, which is the word that we didn't put in the title for a lot of different reasons, which I won't get into. But really, this was sort of, and it has nothing to do with anyone's age. It has nothing to do with that. But you can read in the intro why I didn't put it in the title. But these are 8 poets who, at least in the United States, and in Legna's case, this isn't true, in her native Cuba, but in the United States, poets who didn't have full-length collections out with a publisher. So we felt like that was a good sort of organizing principle for what we were looking at. So that was the genesis of it. And then, I had a list that was way more than 8, and then slowly it became 8. And I'm really excited about these 8 poets, as you'll see. I'm not going to introduce them via biography. I think in this case that would probably be reductive. You'll get to meet them through their work. But I think the important thing is that their voices are all so distinctive, and yet I think collectively they sort of represent a Miami of this moment. Almost all of them were born somewhere else, whether in the United States or outside the United States. But a lot of them have been here a long time. Some of them have not been here a long time and might not be here much longer. So it's a mix. It's a range, and that's Miami. We people come here and go. But I think what's different about the Miami now is there's so many contributions to what's happening culturally, and it feels like every new person here is contributing something really amazing. So before we go on, I also just want to thank everyone who was involved in the creation of this book, the entire Alai Books staff. The beautiful appearance of this book is thanks to Seth Lobbins and Topos Graphics. And then, of course, Melody Santiago Cummings, who is the one who makes these things disappear from our office in a way that allows us to keep making books. And is our O Miami den mother in many different ways. So, yeah, There are 8 poets. They're going to read based on an order that I got from random.org. So it's not the order of the book. And I'll just introduce them by name right before they come up, but I'll say all their names first so you get the scope of it, and then I'll call up the first poet. And thank you again for being here. So we have Anik Adi Babinski, Zain Aslam, Legna Rodriguez Iglesias, Fabian Silvia Josephat, Yadira Peralta, Cherry Pickman, Sarah Trudgeon, and Nick Vagnoni. And this, I didn't plan this, but Nick Vagnoni is the first to read.
Okay. Hi. So the first poem that I'm going to read was written originally for the poetry cruise during Miami last year, the Miami River cruise. So this is only the second time that I've read this in public. So originally it was meant to be read on this boat. So picture yourself in a boat on a river. The other stuff's optional. Okay. Casablanca Fish Market, Miami. They will gut, scale, and fillet it if you ask. And when you tip them, someone will yell, propina, and the men in orange vinyl overalls will thank you without even looking up. But this time, tip them to clean it and leave it whole. This hogfish that you picked from all the others in the vast trays of ice, between the mangrove snapper and cobia, the unmarked pile of grouper cheeks, the roe sacks and silver minnows still threaded with seaweed. Why? Because of its glassy, flame-colored eyes, the rosy flourish of its body as it shimmered from ochre to pink to bronze, its protruding teeth like twisted mangroves in a squall. Slash its sides, fry it whole, and pick it clean with your hands. Pick every feathery piece of meat from the slender, needly bones. Investigate the puzzle of its collar with your teeth and tongue for the oily, slick, rich flesh and wonder, is this terrible? That we should know the inside of an animal better than it knew itself? That we knew it only when it was shelved on a raft of crushed ice? That we saw it swim only in hot oil? We have not even seen the insides of our own bodies, and yet we know every inch of the tiny, finite city of this fish, because we navigate it as our boat navigates the city's river at dusk, exploring its curves and secret places, each bite a moment disappearing inside us. And by eating it this way, we know it completely. We taste the sweetness of the shrimp it ate, the flavors of mussel toughened by constant underwater flight, the salt of so many nights in the ocean, and the last thrashes against the men who pulled it up, who last saw it alive, those missing fingers to the block and tackle, who have given their bodies to fish so that we could taste this one. And as we thread our way up the river, maybe Miami is a fish that has swallowed us like a fingertip, and we who navigate the tall teeth of the buildings downtown at the river mouth, the breathing ribcage of drawbridges and the pulsing organs of boatyards, in the twilight of its belly with only the glow of the sunset through its translucent flesh, until it is dark, until we turn back, return through the jaws, back to the bay, now understanding the animal of this city that has taken us in, that we have eaten of with all of our senses, and that we will continue to consume, bite by bite, as we walk and drive its streets, little parasites amid its scales, awash in the warm currents that pulse day and night across its sharp, throbbing gills. This is called Photo as Double. In the MRI, I hear your voice saying that I don't smile in photos, with our family or at the beach in the early morning or in Thailand last year. And here, amid the bright clang and cold for the first time, why should I smile? Maybe lives ago, I felt the same before my first photograph, before that other new procedure, my body stiff, bracing for the bright smoke and spark, a tiny electrical storm in a trough, like the hum and thunder in this tube, and the suspicion then as now that something is being taken from me by disclosure and by duplication, so that how my brain works or what my eyes say are no longer only mine to convey, that someone may relate me in my absence, that others may think they know me before my arrival. As in Thailand, when we sped on truck beds and mopeds over bridges, past rice fields and the spidery flares of coconut palms, I thought, it's just like the photos. And for a moment, I was pulled from the heat into the cold, humming tube of my memory, into the pictures I'd seen, perhaps in a travel magazine in a waiting room, less special, less surprising, now flattening the scene before me. And so a photograph might precede me in my absence, might flatten me too, and someone might think he is like in his photo, or he is not. And either way, their mind recedes from me for a moment so that they are not totally with me, because part of me is always somewhere else, on a phone, in a frame, in the locket of a broad, stiff envelope of X-rays, so that I am a double, and being a double, one of two, a fraction, less than one, less than whole, and never the same for it, scattered by the lens, diffused as if by a prism, no longer unique in the world, and never really anywhere with anyone anymore. I'm going to read one more poem. This is called If I Have Only My Body. The tomatoes on the balcony have blown down, and everything sags with rain. A man watches the street from a parking garage, smoking in the sluice and whistle of the storm traffic, and you are somewhere in it all, driving home to me. To our low-slung apartment complex, the pool basin drained and shattered, the whole building a sopped sponge, a cluster of small satellite dishes climbing the side like a spray of gray mushrooms. Last night in the storm, I dreamt again of giant fish swimming below me, whale sharks drowsy as freighters, threading a narrow bridge I walked out on. I hear the rain humming through my walls like electricity. By late afternoon, I wake again to the royal palm prodding our window like the muzzle of a giant horse looking for salt or apples. The world is so much bigger than I am. The sleeping fish in my dream, even the insides of the ant on our glass table are bigger than I can understand. My mind is a mirror, but on my walk, the patterns in the coats of the dogs in the park are more than I can understand. The man on the phone driving by my balcony, the ripples in the glass on this table are bigger than my mind. The whole world bends around me, draws closer to me, but what can I tell you of it? I hear a voice deeper than my voice, a voice I hear just before I think each word, a voice I want to know better. All the cars are wet gems. The grease in their doors is a mystery to me. But if I am nothing, if I am porous, a window, if I am windows, if my mind is a cloth of flax moved by the wind, if I am mirrors, then they all pass through me like a thought, and I hold all of them. This is just what you had told me, what sings in our wrists and in our little plug of a home. If I have only my body, what can they take from me? Thank you.
Next up is Fabian Sylvia Josephat.
Hi. I'm going to first read two poems featuring the moon. 1. Moon for Migrants. Slice the moon in two symmetrical slivers. Have its imperfect circumference as you would a fruit, your serrated blade interrupting the wholeness of honeydew or grapefruit. Leave one half behind, pockmarked, scratched, stained with your language and gestures, your loud murmurs of love, your silent defiance, your blackness in question, your history, mockery. Leave that half behind, spotted with footsteps of generational migrants carrying a permanent bundle on their hunched backs. Firewood, pine, bread, birth certificate, judgment, whispers, punishment, memorized folktales as reminder, as a mirror to always remember. Leave that half behind with its starry halo, the saccharine glow of sugarcane suffusing the nights, the untamed hair of palms, the whistle of wind through hemmed skirts of ocean waves crashing like migrant bodies against the foreign shore. In your new bundle, you've packed the other half of the moon, smooth stone, white pebble, mermaid tooth, a breast engorged with milk and honey spilled over these greener grasses. Tuck this half well under your cloak. On this new land, among new stars, your new mission will be to sew both halves back together and make the moon whole again. 2. Moon for medicine. A Haitian moon is a waning smile, sky shy, singed against velvet, eyelids shut among stars, the face of God laughing mischief overhead. A Haitian moon spills Mylenta white light on a sour night through the widow's window and cools down the cholera fever off her baby's bones while she washes bedsheets with her tears, waiting for the hour to devour the flesh. She will bury her child by midnight, by moonlight, under the sinister snicker of trickster gods come to reap like grave robbers, offering the tiny body to the astral body, a sacrifice to celestial light, waiting for the medicine moon, Haitian moon, too late to heal it right. Supermarket blues. My father's ritual at the supermarket is an absence of thought, and his selection of halved papayas cradling their clustered seeds like little mounds of caviar in their ripeness, and the way his hand hovers, raven-like, over black herrings, smoked and sandwiched, festering salt and sulfur under their plastic seal. Instead, he reaches for the beef chunks in the poulet pays he likes to eat pan-fried with a side of red beans and rice for dinner. I follow his movements. I too am disconnected from that round head of lettuce, its rippling skirts a diluted green drenched in dew. I can't tell it apart from the severed half of a cabbage, and I should, given the way the veins reroute their convoluted map as inside a human brain. But my father can't either. He doesn't examine prices on stickers, nor does he read labels and scour ingredients like the mothers pushing their own lives forward, blindly, their children in tow, scanning the aisles for the virtue and cost of canned versus powdered milk, both containers caked in the dust of half a year's push. I have become immune to his self-awareness, his recognition that he too is split, middle-sexed, father and mother, Victor and Victoria, symmetrically divided between protector and nurturer. He straddles both horses unevenly on days like this at the supermarket, keeping up in height and competence with high heels and knee-length dresses. His uniform is navy or black, a suit donned Monday to Friday. His afro, picked to perfection, lines up with the pressed and curled hair framing these women's plump, delicate faces, filmy with powder and hunger. He loosens his tie between the charcuterie and the fruits et légumes aisles, where the wives peer into the display case and tap a fingernail, couleur cerise, against the glass to point out ham and salami. This is where he loses me, in his accidental bumping of cart against another, a mother he hasn't seen in months. When they gush in pleasantries and lose track of the hour to reminisce about the last time they spoke or saw each other in a courtroom, at a function, or here at the supermarket, where her husband's absence weighs as much as the melon in her carriage, and where he, single, roams weekly out of obligation. They often don't notice when I slip away, my eyes lingering on cologne bottles and beach dresses and sunglasses before finding aisles of books and magazines. When I go back, I find them still there in the back of the store, or sometimes having moved just a few inches, but then exchanging tips on safety and opinions on politics, on how to avoid barricades of flaming tires on a school day, on how to remember to exercise caution when entering and leaving a home, even when caution protects no one. At the cash register 2 hours later, my father counts his money and hands it over to the clerk he knows by name. She knows him and his habits well, and has now taken to greeting us at first sight. My father nods and forces a smile if the energy is left. In the cart, he makes sure the baguette bread is kept apart from the other items. It's his breakfast of choice, with a cup of coffee, for the mornings when we will sit together, him at the head of the table, me at the corner, sipping in silence our mutual solitude, staring at all the food purchased to be eaten alone, without my mother's hands to bless it. Last one. Hair poem. That needle scratch, that lick on vinyl, that banjo strum tonight, that high-pitched screech we hear is that of my hair under the metal teeth of Afro picks, and my mother thumbing its chords like a kalimba. Taming wilderness is serious business, and with a dip of her finger in the mascretti butter, she glides the jelly smooth and easy along the strands of hair. She tries again. The comb bites the knots and rakes down the part. Now, the terrazzo beneath our feet is blanketed with kernels of coiled peppercorns, failed resistance against the metal jaws. Her fingers drive now, rumba, cha-cha with the section now. It's how she twines and weaves and domesticates that thing. One day, I say, one day, I will have my mother's hair, soft and beautiful, dark and lovely, manageably straight. Meanwhile, she says, pick up that dispersed herd, those fallen feathers of your flock, and toss them in this fire, so that they burn and shrivel down to an oily pulp, so that we may stir this tar again in the ember oil of that jar, regrow and recycle what's come out. Preserve is Goliath's strength. Thank you.
Jerry Pickman.
The first two I'm going to read are what I consider my Rhode Island poems. I wrote them when I was living there a couple years ago, and that's where I'm from, and they're very much in that state of mind. Islanders. We live among wings of rooms, become attuned to certain sounds. The rain on its way but still held in smeared clouds, the heat through its maze of ducts. We breathe the forced air. I have developed a covert kind of worship, lest any god should notice. I make everyday objects holier than they ought to be, altered, candlelit. The evidence prayer is working is in the daily discomforts, the way a healing stitch itches. You trap buttons, bone white with the radiance of stars in your top drawer. To simulate the accountability of daylight, you sleep with the lights on. Our house cat lions through the hallways, and you dream of the bottom of a lake tiled with blue mussels. From the lawn, the damp rises to meet me. Cedar shingles cast gray in pitched angles. You show me the one thing you need, and I'll match that lack. When the sun returns to shame us with unutterable generosities, we'll be anchored to the magnitude of our collective forfeit. To make a starting place, we'll need significant inventory. Empty your pockets. To make up for islanding, we'll need a bridge. To atone, a compass. No one passes this effortlessly. Fasten the stars to your jacket. If we go, we leave everything. We'll need a lightness unlike us. Pray we're made light as prayer, or anything offered up and scattered midair. Plant life. Certain succulents can be coaxed to bloom by withholding water. Other plants push to blossom by cutting or by cold. The desert isn't always hot, isn't empty. I went looking for a barren place. Each cactus flower a stubborn and singular sun. Each barb a testament, a warning. Out there, the days return in faithful duplicate, the enthusiasm of which is almost impossible to withstand, unnatural. In the green recesses of grow houses, a mechanical sun reigns over its hydroponic network. There are no bugs and few glitches. The squash is perfect over and over again. If its cluster of seeds looks disease, you're wrong. If its skin reminds you of something else, you've been misled. It's hard to tell what's poisonous. The moon seed grew into the wild grapes. The rank fruit fell from palmate hearts. I'd grown accustomed to the wrong signs, and welcomed sour, took bitter. Why wouldn't I be punished for such plenty? The last two poems I'm going to read are from a series where I stole the titles of MFK Fisher's How to Cook a Wolf, her chapter titles. And for those of you who don't know this book or MFK Fisher, she wrote How to Cook a Wolf as a sort of guide to living well and eating well in wartime rationing. So yeah, she has each section, it's a little chapter, and then a little bit of philosophy, story, advice, whatever, and then one or two accompanying recipes. So I stole their chapter titles, made them poem titles, and took a little language from each chapter and then made my own poems. And none of them have anything to do with food or war or anything. But I consider them my Miami poems. So how to greet the spring. The sun was out. The flood came anyway. The sea rose to take the city plinth by plinth. Amaranth bled red into twitching schools of silver buttonwoods. To think what you could have given up. Here, even the gulls are starving, the fishermen are fighting, all the waters of the world are troubled and suspect. The little river, the little God in you who lets you go on each day is out of its depth. Out of darkness you reel in dented cans. They empty through rusted stars as the world warms, and the rooftops clamor for higher and higher ground. And finally, how not to boil an egg. How easy it is to stray from austerity when the water reaches a certain height and the city comes to a boil, and the city's sky isn't a reflection of its inhabitants, but is, in fact, more water, more than you need, fit for nothing, a poor economy probably. One of the most private things in all the world is an egg until it's broken. Smile. You are being documented. You are becoming a person, unconscious of the manifold disguises, not to mention artful imitations that can tempt any sentient. By principle, you'll need at least one flower, a bird, bougainvillea, brown pelican. Don't leave it alone. Don't overdo it. Thanks.
Yadira Peralta.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, especially my favorite person in the world, Sophia. So a majority of these poems are about the Honduras of my imagination, and one is a poem I wrote after taking a really beautiful trip into the Everglades. Coffee. The coffee bush that sprouts from Honduran soil thrives in the shade. It is a heavy gift. Life of mornings accumulated, the smell of freshly tilled soil. The vagrant berries are picked by children and spilled like marbles across the highlands, or else smuggled across the border and sold to us as Guatemalan. I once saw a river the color of coffee with cream. Those waters carried the sediment of far-off soils through the shifting foreign tongues of the forest, and from there to the moonscape of the ocean. My kitchen is a moonscape, and sometimes the spaceship from my old homelands. The things I smell and hear are not memories, but recognitions. Some things are meant to travel far from home and never return. So I have a few poems about Jesus Christ kind of randomly traveling the country. And here's one. It's called Christ Swims Toward His 10. How he made it to the northern coast, we'll never know. The railroad tracks were in places incomplete. Once there, Christ searched for the best bananas, but found toucans instead, hidden in trees lining paths leading to the sea. He took hold of one and spoke to it of the pleasures of all the color in this, the company town. But the locals remained indoors. Near the port, he walked into the water, that ridiculous bird on his shoulder. In search of brighter lands, still, he thought of the mountains of so great a country, how they spread out as if joining hands, impassive faces obscured by clouds. And in this one, he's swimming. Christ still swimming. Still. The waters are calmer than those of the Sea of Galilee, devoid of disciples, fishing in the wings, waiting for another trumped-up tumult. Jesus swims amongst the anemone waving, the darkened brain coral, its hardened whirls, twisting away and coming back like some thoughts. He brushes past the moon jelly, the comb jelly, floating up balloon-like and skin-stinging. As Christ thinks, I will fear no evil. A school of yellow-tailed parrotfish casts a shadow. Shallow-eyed, each turns to follow the other, little cogs in a machine. In this sea-blue sea, the floor opens up like an infant mouth, toothless, mute mouth, wide and eternal, before its wailing. And this is called Bodies of Water, and all I'll say is that the last, so I'm going to pause between each section, and the last section mentions a bird called a chachalaca. These birds are very loud, and I found out that they're also slang in some places for talkative, borderline gossipy women. So, Bodies of Water. Father's people on an island with a single road, and the dock always there. Down the walk, 3 pens for pigs. In the mornings, I fed them banana peels while licking my salted lips. I named them, and they were taken. Days indoors, marked by the cock's crow, when I would not go out to the ocean. Days when I sat at my grandfather's feet, the dock and her warm smells banished from my mind, the sea an intangible wedge of blue. Olancho is landlocked but contains the following bodies of water: Rio Silca, Lepaguare, Dardanelos, Rio Grande, Rio Chiquito, Rio Viejo, and el Rio Guayape, watering a pampas of beef cows, blinking tears like mother's tears, such water rushing forth, quick and sweet. When mother was a widow and made to live amongst quiet people in a house no longer hers, she was a tree and grief her sap. Upwards it flowed, this bitter liquor, toward darkened leaves already falling. Once bare, she was elemental. By the meager stream, she waited in vain for the chachalacas strutting on her branches to grow strong and take her away. And just one more short one. This is called La Cuna. The world is mostly water, sawgrass, sky, then a single cypress tree. Before this, another river, surface meandering when the boats have stilled. All my life, I was a singular star high in the sky. Today, the wind washes over my brown-skinned, sweetly. All I want to know is, Anhinga, where do you fly to and for how long? Thank you.
Sarah Trudgeon, Party of Two.
Hi. I'm gonna read 2 sort of brutal and inappropriate poems. So, Lives of the Poets.